Desmos or something like that. So it is a Google packet. You guys should go ahead and turn to the first page of your packet, and you are going to complete pages 1 and 2. 6 multiple choice problems. I'm going to set the timer for 6 minutes following along AP pacing. So you're going to practice with these 6 questions that are going to look very old because they are from period 1 and 2. But go ahead and do your best. You have 6 minutes. Go ahead and get started. 6 minutes. You're going to actually take it. You have 3 minutes left. You should be done with questions 1 through 3. So again, 3 questions, 3 minutes left. Questions 1 through 3 should be done. You should be on 4 through 6. Ninety more seconds. One more minute. Fifteen seconds to follow AP pacing. You should be finishing up question 6. And that is time. So again, if you are following AP pacing, you should be done with question 6. Just make a note of how far you got on your own to check to see how much multiple choice pacing practice you should take. I'm now going to go over the answers, so please make sure you are checking your work. Number 1 is B. Number 2 is A. Number 3 is D. Number 4 is D. Number 5 is A. And number 6 is B. Any questions on why those are the correct answers? Number 2 is A. I don't see any other questions about the content, so we'll go ahead and move on. Before we get started on today's review lecture, I just want to remind you about the practice APUSH exam that's going to be on Friday from approximately 8:30 to 12:30. It's definitely going to start at 8:30, should be ending around 12:30 depending on your pacing. So if you have not sent in your RSVP status, either via email or text or whatever, please make sure you do that before tomorrow at 3 p.m. so that way I know who to prepare for. Shout out to Sierra, Jalasia, and Mela for already getting those into me. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions about that, please let me know. If transportation is an absolute issue, I can create an online forum. Just please make sure that you're communicating why, because in-person practice is going to be the thing that helps. And as a reminder, participation on Friday will equal 100% in terms of classwork grades. So participating Friday will be 100% classwork grades, which is going to be a huge help for your GPA in this last quarter. Feel free to chat me if you have any questions or concerns about that, or send me an email, and I will absolutely get back to you. We're now going to transition into today's review lecture on some content that we have not seen in a very long time. So we're going to review this to make sure that we are all good to go. Make sure you are prepared to turn in your notes at the end of the class period. So today's lecture, we are going to review the colliding worlds, the initial settlement and colonization of North and South America that you guys reviewed over the summer last year. So we are going to start in 1492 when Columbus lands in America. I'll give you guys 30 seconds to get your notes set up. Sorry, I didn't give you the chance earlier. So make sure you have your notes set up. And this is the first thing we're reviewing is 1492. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We are going to get started looking at 1492 when Columbus lands in the Indies. So a little bit of background information on Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was a Spanish sailor who was really hoping to get money from the Spanish crown, was really looking for the crown to sponsor his exploration. Columbus was motivated by all three of the G's. So he's motivated by the three G's: God, gold, and glory. And ultimately, he lands in what we know today as the Bahamas. So he lands in the Bahamas. And the most notable thing about Columbus's arrival is this development of the Columbian Exchange. Now, the Columbian Exchange refers to the transfer of, so the Columbian Exchange is the transfer of goods, plants, animals, people, diseases, and even ideas. And this transfer is between Europe, the Americas, and Africa. And this exchange took place over the 15th and 16th centuries. This Columbian Exchange drastically affected Europe, Africa, and the Americas. And now we're going to focus and zoom in on how these different countries colonized North and South America differently. And first, we're going to look at the Spanish. Now, the Spanish were very quick to destroy. And they destroyed through conquest and the spread of disease, sometimes intentionally. The Spanish also created a form of slavery known as encomienda. And this system of encomienda was an exchange of native labor for protection from the Spanish or by the Spanish. So the natives would be forced to work on Spanish land, and the Spanish would pretend to protect them. In contrast, we're going to look at the English, who were more focused on permanent settlements. So when the English come to North America and seek to establish these permanent settlements, they saw natives as an obstacle that they had to deal with. And rather than enslave the natives, they just worked harder to push them off of their land. Which was the beginning of hundreds of years of conflict. On the other hand, we have the French, who cultivated much more positive relationships with the natives. And they needed these positive relationships to establish the fur trade. Between the French and the natives, there was also increased cultural exchange and even intermarriage. So again, the Spanish are marked by violence. The English are marked by pushing them off. And the French are marked by more positive relations. Now we're going to zoom in and look more closely at the colonization by the English and the establishment of the different colonies. English colonization had been going on for a while, but it officially sticks in 1607. In 1607, the first successful English colony was established, known as Jamestown. This colony was sponsored by the Virginia Company, and the Virginia Company is a joint stock company which means that this colony is established to make money and to bring money back to British investors. Jamestown struggles a lot in the beginning because most of the first settlers were men and there were very few families, alongside very harsh winters. But Jamestown becomes successful when it establishes and finds the cash crop of tobacco. Make sure you have that written down. Jamestown becomes successful after it discovers tobacco. "13 years later, we have the establishment of Plymouth Rock. So in 1620, in Massachusetts, Plymouth was established by people seeking religious refuge. The Pilgrims land in Plymouth as a way to seek refuge from religious persecution that they faced in Europe. And the last of the early English colonies we're going to look at is Massachusetts Bay. Massachusetts Bay is established in 1630 by the Puritans. So that's important to make sure you have the difference. Plymouth is established by Pilgrims. Massachusetts Bay is established by Puritans. Massachusetts Bay was led by John Winthrop, and their goal was to purify the church. That's where the word Puritan comes from. They want to purify the church and start a more pure colony. Now we're going to look at the middle colonies. Now, the middle colonies are marked by their religious roots. For example, one group, the Quakers, were heavily persecuted in England for being pacifists. So again, Quakers were persecuted in England for being pacifists. And they also believed that religious authority comes from within. So again, they believe religious authority comes from within. And so William Penn, who is a wealthy Quaker, gets a hold of some land and forms the colony of Pennsylvania. So William Penn forms the colony of Pennsylvania in 1681. And his goals were to create Pennsylvania and make it be a land of toleration. So again, Pennsylvania was tolerant to all religious beliefs, and they also believed in fair treatment of the Native Americans. Now we're going to look at labor systems. The first major labor system that is used in the colonies is indentured servitude. Now, indentured servants were usually young people who worked for a contracted amount of time. The contracts were usually for about 4 to 7 years. They would work that contract time in exchange for passage to America and room and board. However, the first enslaved people arrive in Virginia in 1619 and quickly become an integral part to the colonial economy. And slavery's role in the colonies becomes solidified after Bacon's Rebellion. After Bacon's Rebellion, a rebellion led by indentured servants and the enslaved people, rich colonists realize that they need to have a race-based chattel slavery in order to have total control over their workforce. They saw the alliance between indentured servants and enslaved people as a threat, and so they make this switch, phase out indentured servitude, and switch to a chattel-based slavery. And so I can almost guarantee you'll get at least one multiple choice question on Bacon's Rebellion. The long-term effect of Bacon's Rebellion is it makes slavery a solidified part of the colonial economy. As we know, we're going to be dealing with this for the next few hundred years. Now we're going to hit a couple of trade and economy key terms before we go into the regional differences of the colonies. So I'm just going to go straight into these key terms at the top of your slide to make sure that we have the important stuff. So first is mercantilism. Now, mercantilism looks at the colonies as a source of wealth and imperial power for the English. Again, mercantilism looks at the colonies as a source of wealth and imperial power for the English. Now, to make that successful, the English passed the Navigation Acts. Now, the Navigation Acts were passed by the English, and it restricted colonial trade. So England said that the colonies could only trade certain things to certain countries. But what's important about the Navigation Acts is at first, they're pretty ignored by colonists, and the British don't do a lot to enforce it, but that will change and be one of the main causes for the American Revolution. And finally, the triangle trade is what the Columbian Exchange becomes. The triangle trade refers to the trade of goods and people between the continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia. And it's important to know that the triangle trade was only possible because of the slave trade through the Middle Passage. Now we're going to look at regional similarities and differences, starting with the economy and the environment. As we know, the colonies become very distinct very quickly, and they're separated into three main groups. The first main group is New England, or the northern colonies. The second are the middle colonies. And third, the Chesapeake colonies. Chesapeake is spelled Chesapeake. And the Chesapeake colonies are also known as the Southern colonies. Now, the Southern colonies rely on slavery and agriculture. So again, the South relies on slavery and agriculture to be successful. And this is because of the Southern environment, which is hot and has fertile soil. Whereas New England or northern colonies focused on shipbuilding and trade. Because their soil was cold and generally poor. Now, it's important to know that the middle colonies are a mixture of both, and they do some shipbuilding and some agriculture. Next, we're going to look at religion and the differences between the colonies. First, we're going to look at the New England colonies. And it's important to remember that the New England colonies were established by religious societies. And so their colonies become extremely religious because they are founded by very religious people. And unfortunately, people like the Pilgrims and the Puritans end up persecuting other people within the colonies. On the other side, you have colonies like Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, who are founded by people who were escaping that intolerance. And so Rhode Island and Pennsylvania allowed Catholics, Quakers, and Jewish people. And they also made sure that Native Americans were treated fairly. Oops. Now we're going to look at immigration. Now, immigrants are the reason why the colonies are able to grow so quickly. And while the English continue to immigrate to the colonies, we start to see a growth of Germans and Scottish and Irish people. Now, the Germans, Scottish, and Irish tended to settle in the middle colonies because that is where they had the greatest chance for religious freedom. But the most important group that was forcibly immigrated into the colonies are the Africans. Africans were taken captive and forced onto European ships and sent to work in the colonies. And 90% of African slaves lived in the South. So 90% of African slaves live in the South, but most colonies, including those in the North, had some amount of enslaved people. And all colonies had laws that discriminated against Africans and limited their rights. Okay, this is our last slide where we look at the politics and family life of the colonies, and then we'll transition to the exit ticket. An important thing about the colonies that helps lead to the American Revolution is the establishment of self-governments that all colonies had. All colonies had some form of self-government. In Virginia, in 1619, they established the House of Burgesses. Burgesses is spelled Burgesses. And the House of Burgesses gives rights to wealthy landowners. And in Plymouth, the Pilgrims signed the Mayflower Compact, which created the rule by the majority and allowed male church members to vote into elections. Throughout New England, colonists prioritized community spaces where people could gather and vote. But it's important to know that for almost all of this, it was still limited to men. And it was expected that women stay home, cook, clean, and educated the children. So women were in charge of educating their children. But men worked and made financial decisions. And that is it for this first review lecture. You guys have a place in the last page to respond to an exit ticket where you're going to describe similarities and differences and explaining why. You also have on page 3 a place where you can brainstorm and list evidence that supports all 3 of these ideas. If you complete page 3, that is extra credit, but page 4 will be graded. So again, page 3 is extra credit on today's packet. Page 4 is graded. So again, make sure you're describing a similarity, explaining why, and then describing a difference and explaining why. Go ahead and get started. If you have any questions about this exit ticket, please let me know. Once I see you've submitted on Google Classroom, you are free to go. But if you need to wait to submit because you're going to do page 3, just chat me and let me know so I know that's why. Awesome. You have 5 minutes. Once you submit your classwork packet, you're good to go.